recruitment industry, those might be big sharks in HR processes and so on. So the fact that we have this session proves again, and the warm-up campaign we had proves that recruitment, unfortunately, is still biased. And to be honest, while preparing for this webinar, I ran a little experiment. I spent 4 weeks actively trying to land the job. And to be honest, I experienced every kind of bias you can imagine: ageism, racism, and a wall of automation where recruiters were nowhere to be found, to be honest. And actively talking, in most cases, no conversations and context were provided in those interactions. And what most unfair, I suppose, there was just silence and auto replies in most cases, not in everyone, but in most cases. So here is the message this webinar starts with. Dear companies and company owners, if you want to hire real human people, give them real human recruiters. And remember, dear recruiters, fair hiring is not about saying you're 30, we need 20 years old. So with all this shame in mind, let's talk about what fair hiring actually looks like and whether AI is helping it or really quietly making it worse. And first, I'd prefer to introduce our speakers for today's session. Cindy Norcutt, CEO of Pro Talent, South Africa's most respected recruitment firm, and a founder of the Robin Hood Foundation that channels direct support to underserved communities. Cindy, thanks a lot for joining us today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Renata.
Thank you. And here's another speaker with us, Ryan Youssef, a founder of Injobnito, a US-based hiring platform built to remove hiring bias by design. Ryan, thanks a lot for joining us as a speaker that comes from the product space and the ground of business. And it really supports our discussion today from the point of business side with a sharp focus on how AI really fits into the future history of fair hiring. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Great. Then would be really interesting to learn something from your own experience. Cindy, Ryan, if we're talking about kind of looking back at your own journeys, what kinds of bias have you personally encountered during interviews or while being hired previously in your careers?
Cindy, I'll let you go first.
From my own side, I've pretty much hired myself since I was 23 years old. But, in terms of where I am now, I'm 55 years old. And what I'm seeing in the marketplace is a lot of ageism. So there is this perception that if you're over 40 or 45 or 50 or 55, you must be not dynamic. I suppose I also encountered not necessarily when I was looking for jobs, but when I started my business, I can write a book on the amount of bias that there was against women. I remember one client saying, "How could you send me a woman who has just got married? Obviously, she's about to have a baby." And he was quite angry with us, and you almost think that sounds like something from 1960s, But I think discrimination and bias are alive and well in virtually every corner of the world. And I think in South Africa, obviously, we come from that history of apartheid, where there was tremendous bias. It was legislated, that type of bias, and then they came in with a new dispensation, and we're supposed to be focusing on fairness and non-discrimination, but companies are still doing what they want, if that makes sense. And we see it in the funny things they say, like it's a culture fit, everyone in this department looks like this, and obviously if we hired a woman there, that where would she sit? Or if we hire somebody of a different race or ethnic group, they wouldn't understand the jokes. And things that seem so like, really, is this really what you're dealing with. So even though in South Africa's terms, we've come a long way, a long way. I think I see it all over the world. Actually, I see bias in various shapes and forms.
Nothing to be added, to be honest, especially especially when it comes to ageism, right? Or any sort of separation based on your gender. It's not fair, I suppose, not just because I'm a woman, but also because I've also faced this kind of biases and sort of feedback from companies, unfortunately. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I would say based on like my personal experience, what I've seen about bias in recruitment kind of stems from my father, right? When I was at a young age, my parents came here from the Middle East. I'm first gen American. My dad has a funny name and a funny accent. And then post 9/11, here in the United States was a really big event. And obviously it caused a lot of stir, especially with people with a Middle Eastern background or within the Middle Eastern community. And it was very hard for my dad to find a job. Actually, he couldn't find a job for several years here in the United States because, again, last name is Yusuf, funny accent. Like, those things existed in the early 2000s. And it actually ended up, my father had to move outside the country to get a job. And that was very hard for our family. So I experienced it like firsthand. Like, he has all the experience. He has 2 master's degrees. He's very intelligent, has great background, but nobody's hiring because, he's just facing a lot of discrimination. And that's kind of where my idea kind of stemmed from originally, and how I started building Injobnito was to focus on skills and not personal attributes.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm really happy that today's session is focused not just on discussing the current challenges of recruitment, of the very recruitment process, but also it's really based on personal experiences of speakers. And it's not only about we are doing business and we know our target audiences. No, we felt the same and we were at the situation. And that was the reason why we decided to help the others, right? And directing the world and communities that surround us to make informed decisions, sometimes trying to resolve this problem of bias. And glad to know that I'm not in this alone, because after all, no great battle is ever won single-handed. So we often hear about what candidates need to bring to the table, kind of skills, expertise, and so on. The list is really long, but rarely we discuss and we talk about the standards employers should meet to create fair, inclusive hiring process and recruitment process. And too often bias sleeps in simply because no one's holding the other side of the table accountable. This is unfair, I suppose. If you are showing requirements to the candidates, be ready to meet the requirements of those candidates as well as employer. Cindy, you've spent years placing talent across industries. What forms of bias have you seen show up again and again in hiring based on your long experience, decades of it in the industry?
So, there's that sort of unconscious bias where it's not done intentionally or purposefully, but it is there. So like I said earlier, it's like people favoring people who look like them, who sound like them, who talk like them, people who go to the same kind of schools, universities, similar religions, So I think it can go so many layers. I've also seen, so if we go back in South Africa to the apartheid days, people were disadvantaged in that they did not have access to education. They had such poor education. So what we found, my business started literally the week of our free and fair elections. So that was really interesting. So we had freedom and fairness, yet it wasn't fair. So companies would say, we want somebody with a Bachelor of Commerce degree to do a general accounting role, low level, knowing that disadvantaged people didn't have that. So it was very easy to put over inflated qualifications, or they would say you need to know Afrikaans, which was only a language that white people understood. So the black citizens were never taught that language. So they would say it's for the job. So I think employers got away with a lot of things where they did that, on purpose. And I think, that culture fit word, like, oh, they won't understand us. We don't want to dilute our culture because we've got such a great culture. but often it stood for race. It did not stand for team culture. We've got a great ethos here. It equaled race, or it equaled, you know, the way we look around here. Also, we know that some of the assessment tools are biased. So, you know, they've done validity checks on them, and so people would use tests and then go, well, look here, based on this assessment, we're going with the best person, and the best person was always, say, white and not an Indian or African or a colored person. So I think people sometimes used it to their advantage. And yes, you know, when I started in my career, companies would be blatant. They would tell you, they would, oh no, we couldn't have a female in that role. Oh no, we can't have a male. Oh, they can't be over 35. You know, I must look like this. And I must be honest, it doesn't happen like that anymore. It really, it's so far removed from that. So I don't think it's blatant, but often clients will say, we'll look at the best candidate. But isn't it uncanny how sometimes the best candidate always just looks like them, sounds like them, acts like them? So it's not done in a blatant way from what I'm seeing, but I think there's still definitely a lot of bias in life and in recruitment particularly.
Unfortunately, yes. However, Cindy, your experience really matters because it reflects clearly decades of real world experience. And thanks a lot for sharing, because I'm sure those who are listening to our today's webinar and these attendees really recognize situations they face themselves. Especially, it's a funny thing when you are trying to promote a candidate, right? And they say, an employer says that basically we have no biases or prejudgments, and that's fine. Absolutely, we are ready to work with both men and women. However, after you promote a good woman with really wide expertise plus a really long experience in different domains, with a lot of degrees, including master degrees and so on and so forth, and they just decline this application, and then the recruiter tries to find the very right feedback and what's going on with this employer, why the decision is like that. They're just changing the gender and everything goes right. And an employer wants this candidate to get interview for this company. So sometimes when they're talking about there are no biases at all, the biases, and you've correctly mentioned that basically sometimes it's really connected with the person who is on the side of an employer to get others hired and onboarded to the company. And that's great that your organization is a sort of middleman between those who are seeking job opportunities, right?
Yes.
And those who are willing to recruit the best candidates ever. So here you can really complement each other. I mean, in terms of Ryan's platform, right? And your adaptability and human-based approach to recruitment. That sounds great. And well, when we are discussing the human-like approach, we understand that modern recruitment process is nothing without automation, unfortunately. However, while technology offers powerful tools to improve hiring, it's often the simple act of truly understanding people, their journeys, understanding their motivations, and what drives them to their future workplaces. And that makes a solution truly impactful. So here's the thing, and here is the question to you, Ryan, as the idea holder. Your platform anonymizes candidates to remove bias, and this is one of the reasons why it should be promoted to the community to help many underserved people in the recruitment industry, those who are looking for the jobs but cannot land them. What inspired? We already know that this was inspired by the idea of your own experience and the experience of your family, I mean, right? However, when we're talking about the platform itself, whether it's going to solve only this problem of bias or there is something else behind it.
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, originally, like, I think it's very hard to remove bias, right? Like, The idea originally is to remove it from the early stages so you have a larger talent pool, right? I think that's where we originally see a lot of the bias in recruitment is like when people are outreaching to applicants, they're going through LinkedIn, they're looking at their profile picture, they're looking at their name, they're looking at what school they want. Unconsciously, they have a lot of bias. Like if someone's very attractive, they might be more incentivized to reach out to them and move them to the first initial screening round, right? So the idea essentially came from seeing talented people being overlooked for reasons that have nothing to do with their capabilities. You know, like I mentioned, whether it's like the school, their name, their background, whatever, whether it's conscious or unconscious, right? It still plays a major role in hiring decisions. And, you know, I think it's going to be very difficult to eradicate bias, especially unconscious bias. But like this is a really good first step into helping employers get a much larger access to a talent pool that they might not originally have had through traditional methods. And this will allow, you know, employers to evaluate candidates purely on merit and discover the talent they otherwise would have missed. So that's the idea. And, you know, I don't really think like long term, like I think with technology advancing, like there's going to be a lot of numerous ways to help continue to fight unconscious bias. But for now, like our product is really targeting the very initial stages of it.
Thanks a lot for sharing this. I'm already looking forward to trying the product myself, trying maybe to land the job there is just to try to get in touch with somebody on the platform and see how unbiased strategies really work out there and whether the platform's logic helps and how, right? Just to investigate what's happening and maybe giving some sort of feedback, because feedback means a lot to those who are at the beginning of their product development, right? Because relying on this feedback is better to develop the platform the right way. Cindy, in your opinion, and bear in mind what was described by Ryan, whether such technologies can be used in your vision, because basically the privilege of today's discussion and what makes today's conversation so valuable is the chance to hear perspective from different corners of the world. You are from South Africa, Ryan is from the United States of America, right? However, there is something in common, still something in common, and a lot of, as long as we go in our conversation. In your opinion, in your view, how do social, racial, or maybe economic inequalities affect recruitment in South Africa, and whether such platforms as Ryan's one may help you overcome, or it's always unfortunately matter of the culture and such platforms cannot work at all? They can really get implemented only in specific cultures and mentalities.
So I think in South Africa, we have a very unique situation. We've got the highest Gini coefficient in the world, which means that, you know, that it's such an unequal society. So, you know, if you just advertise a role and you say, please apply and fill in a form online, do an assessment online, for most of us, that's fine. That's no problem. But for a lot of people who are disadvantaged, they don't have a computer. They don't have access to a computer. They don't have airtime. They don't have data. So whereas things that like already are making them have a step back in the process. So they would have to get on a taxi, get into town. So spending money that they don't have to go and use a resource like that, which we just have in our pockets, you know. And so I think for a lot of people, that is the first step. It's something that most probably first world countries wouldn't even think about, you know. And never mind not having a network and not having a great support system and not having a great CV as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's these kind of things that are really problematic for job seekers. So if a client says, and I'll give you examples. Often a client in recruitment, we say time kills deals. So we have a client, they give us a job description, a job spec, and they say, send us CVs. They want CVs as soon as possible. Time is marching on. So often they would want us to get a candidate to do an assessment or send a video or do something as well as a CV, an online interview. And for a lot of candidates, sometimes they are no longer in the running because they haven't met those deadlines, you know, and it's not a lack of interest. It's probably because of the insurmountable obstacles they have. And so that can be quite a challenge for certain candidates. Sometimes they weren't educated in the language of the assessment. So English, say, would be a second language. So not understanding the nuances of the language could help could hurt their chances of doing well as well. Never mind any other biases that there are, in that space.
Sounds like a real problem, to be honest, in the community, especially when it comes to checking the newsletters and newspapers reviews regarding how big sharks of IT or other industries invested billions and trillions into data infrastructures of the region. However, we're still having the fact when people cannot simply connect to the internet in order to get interviewed by potential employers, and employers do not simply do not want to hear such candidates, right, and do not want to put extra efforts to attract them. So this is unfair hiring, and this is where bias starts from. If we do not invest extra resources to overcome the challenges having these resources for resolving the problem, then unfortunately we cannot solve the problem at all, because the 100% inclusivity cannot get reached at all, because there should be always two sides of the problem. Call it like that. People who are rich want to be reached as long as they can, and they will not put much attention as they can to those who are underserved or unserved at all, right? So nobody cares, as we see, unfortunately, in the market. And thanks that with this webinar, you are really honest about the situation. Maybe it will attract hope, so it will attract third parties to try to suggest real value to the market and real help and support to those who are looking for those jobs. Hope so. After this webinar, some regions in Africa will get wider access to the internet in order to get onboarded to the platform of Ryan and get processed, get their CVs processed at the platform, and to get hired to most interesting companies and to most excited and supportive employers in the world. Now back to that little experiment I ran before the webinar. I would say that when it comes to trying to find a job, to land a job, I tested a lot of platforms, to be honest, from Europe, from the United States. Around 80% of them looked and felt exactly the same. So they have same features, same onboarding, same lack of differentiation. And it reminded me of that ed tech case, kind of everyone wants to be the next Duolingo, but few understand why it works. So nobody takes into consideration the user's experiences and their pain points, what can potentially attract these users to the platform, and so on and so forth. And so the easiest thing for these providers is just copy and paste each other's interfaces. Here's a question to you, Ryan. Knowing how wide bias is right now on the global level, without sharing your know-how for sure and secret sources, could you give an idea of what your bias for recruitment platform suggests, and how does it differ from those in the markets right now?
Yeah, no, good question. I think you kind of nailed it when you said a lot of like the platforms are very similar. Like right now, like currently on the market, it's pretty much like job boards are just like giant like filtration systems, right? With like basic like keyword like search functionalities. And at Injobnito, like my main issue was I don't want to be like another job board, and like I'm trying to solve for a bigger problem. And we started that by focusing and building a skill-first hiring platform. So essentially, this is where candidates are entirely anonymous, and we have a pretty basic algorithm that essentially matches capabilities, and it provides like a capability scoring, which is currently like not on the market, right? So the reason why this is so different is because traditional platforms will like often surface people based on like superficial filters, and it doesn't really focus like real alignment between the job requirements and what the candidate offers. And we try to do that without introducing bias into the equation. So like one thing that I think is really cool, I mentioned the compatibility scoring, right? So like if you go onto our platform and you're looking for like a software engineer, we do have filters in like a search bar, but when you start using them, it filters it and gives you a compatibility score of like, this person is a 98%. So then, you know, like based on what you're looking for, like there's a strong match there versus like other platforms that are just very basic, and you don't really know if they're a match because you're just kind of using a basic click filtration system. So I would say that what differentiates us from the rest on the market.
Thanks a lot, Ryan, for sharing this. Really sounds perspective, especially when it comes to fair hiring. And maybe when we trying to get aligned with the market, take your platform, try to understand the African market right now, and try to suggest some additional filtration to the platform to increase this match, kind of whether this candidate has access to the internet, right? Whether this candidate can get interviewed online, or it's better to promote them some offline on-site rooms, right in the country, or through some partnerships. So this is the case. Sometimes when you're creating go-to-market strategies and when you're trying to understand how to promote this platform to get it aligned with other markets in order to increase your user base, it's just a matter of right collaboration. And I still think that such collaborations as companies like ProTalent and recruitment platforms like Ryan's one and globally can really complement each other when it comes to penetrating markets and knowing target audiences' needs. Because if person doesn't have access to the internet, he simply cannot give you any feedback how your platform works. They do not have access to the platform at all. Forget about those users, and the niche can be really wide and big one to get earned. And sometimes these people even more payable than those who have this access to the internet, really, because those who are underserved, they are ready to invest some money into the solutions that can help them to reach anything. Like those people who are ready to leave their countries in Africa, Middle East, in order to get to Germany and other European countries, just to get fairer salaries, right, or more attractive job conditions. So there are a lot of examples. We can list them within long hours. However, the webinar is not for this. Let's keep going and get back to our main conversation. Basically, when we're talking about potential usage of such platforms, we're talking about data and data usage, right? However, what about this data usage and potential risks, Ryan? Do you see any risk in over-relying on technologies like AI or any sort of automations that kind of doing this matching on the platform, whether they can provide any extra risks to the recruitment process while solving human challenges like inclusion or providing unbiased processes? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. So, technology is only fair as the data and design behind it, right? So if we build AI tools on biased data, we just scale the problem faster. That's why, relying on tech to solve like deeply human challenges, it's very important that we still have human oversight, we have transparency, and there's inclusive design. It's very critical. So like we see AI as a powerful like enabler, but it's not necessarily like a silver bullet. Like solving bias requires both better tools and better intentions, right? Like the technology is not going to solve all the problems. It still requires a lot of human oversight.
Fully agree. And when it comes to solving problems, it's about experience always, right? But without right experience, you cannot sometimes provide a good solution to it. And experience speaks louder than theory, especially when it comes to real hiring process and managing the expectations of everyone involved, not just finding a match. So Cindy, here's a question, a good one to you, because your experience is really based on regular communications, interconnections, collaborations with people from both sides, those who are seeking for jobs and those who are seeking for potential employees. Have you ever seen resistance or say unexpected challenges when trying to convince companies to hire without knowing someone's name, gender, or background? Perhaps you had such cases in your practice, just to help both sides to get introduced to each other, knowing that bias may destroy everything. That's why it's better just to hide these biased factors in order to get those sides introduced to each other and meet each other for interviews.
I actually really like what Ryan is doing with the platform, because I think it is, what I think it's going to do? It's going to challenge people's stereotypes, because if I'm looking for a developer, let's just say, and there's a 98% match, and I'm thinking it's going to be a white male, let's just say, and it's an Indian female. Wow. I'm gonna, if I found out, I might never have looked at her beforehand, and I'm just using that as a general thing. So I do like the idea of it being sort of faceless and anonymous, and I think it could help people to kind of circumvent those biases, because I think sometimes people would not even look at the CV in the first place if somebody doesn't match what they think is the right person. But I also want to just say that I think that recruiters, we are also gatekeepers of fairness. And if a client is saying to you, I want this, and they're trying to perpetuate some form of discrimination, I think it is incumbent upon us as well to say, that doesn't sound right to me. Let me send you the best candidates. You know what I mean? Not just the ones that fit your profile, but let me send you the best that there is in the market at the salary level. So I think recruiters need to have a bit of courage, to challenge clients and to send the merit, send the best people for the jobs. And if a client says, oh no, I don't want to see candidate C, but to say, but candidate C is actually, in my opinion, the most suitable candidate, give them a chance, and I think to encourage that. But I think that's where recruiters probably could get involved from that space. And then also, just to add on to Ryan, I think we are all very excited about AI bandwagon, but I think it's got to be used with that human oversight. And as Ryan honestly said and accurately said, if rubbish is in, rubbish is out. So if bias goes in, it scales up. So I think it is incumbent on human common sense as well to go, does this look right? Is this correct? And I think that's where we need to rely on our human intelligence and our instincts, our human instincts as well.
Thanks a lot, Cindy, for sharing this. I see a lot of, in common points between you and Ryan, your cultures and hiring processes and how you envision them from the point of own business or from the point of own product. Still, in your experience, whether what the ratio of cases in your own experience of recruiting when employer doesn't want to see a candidate at all and fully trusts your own experience, and the ratio of those who are still trying to investigate their CVs in detail before suggesting any sort of meetings, interviews, and so on.
So, I mean, there will always be those employers who will decide what they want. Does that make sense? I only want to see this one candidate. I'm not giving a reason why. But often we have had some success where we've said to a client, can we do a quick 10-minute Zoom call or Teams call and just have an intro meeting? It's not even an interview, but a chat. And often they are willing to do that. So that's been quite encouraging. And we've had situations where clients have gone, wow, I'm impressed with that candidate. We'll give them a try. And then you're like, yeah, it's the best person got the role rather than the best person of that gender or of that group, So it's exciting to see it when you see it played out, Yeah.
Thanks. I'm really happy that since this is a selling point for you, when you can really promote short interviews with the candidate, right, to employers, just to check whether this is a chemistry between you, right, and whether it's worth moving forward with the next steps, kind of technical interviews, if it's about technical specialties and positions, or sort of any kind of business reviews, right, if we're talking about sales and marketing and product positions and job places. Sounds interesting and encouraging, yet sometimes when it comes to selection, the very selection process to find a good candidate, sometimes what one person sees as bias might actually stem for cultural differences and the other way around. And that's what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago, about cultural differences, right? And differentiation in mentalities and how it impacts the further process of recruitment on the side of employers and on the side of the very candidates. The question to both of you, if you don't mind, Cindy and Ryan, you are from very different corners of the world. How do cultural expectations shape what fair hiring means in your region, in the United States and in South Africa?
Ron, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. In the United States, like fair hiring, often it means like removing barriers related to like race, gender, like socioeconomic background. But like elsewhere, fairness could look much different. Like some cultures, they value academic prestige more. Others might emphasize age or even appearance. So really, I think that's why context matters. But however, like universally, I think there is a desire to be seen and judged based on your potential and like not your profile. So I think although it might be different in terms of context and what we're being judged on or what fair hiring looks like, I think the root of it, everyone wants to be seen for who they are or judged based on their merit and not what they look like or where they're from or etc.
Ryan, I agree with that as well. And I think in South Africa, coming from the past we've had, with when the new government came in 1994, they changed so many of our labor laws. We have very, very stringent labor laws here. And one of them is the Employment Equity Act, where anyone who was previously disadvantaged should be given first preference. So it's not just something that people say, it's something that it's actually mandated. It's not just a nice to have. So I think we've made a lot of strides in that place. But it's also like I think it's not just the recruitment process. I think we've seen examples. They always talk about diversity and inclusion. Because often client companies we've seen have employed people, but then they're not made to feel included. So I think it's it goes a step further than just the recruitment process, but the workplaces as well. And also looking at the potential of people over the credentials. So, you might not have the honors degree or master's degree, but you certainly do have the potential, as you said. So I think for people to be able to work out how do we identify potential in people, because not everybody has the right credentials that we're looking for in terms of like educational qualifications. I also think structured interview processes as well. So it's quite interesting. A woman will go into an interview and they'll ask her about how many children she wants, and a man will go into an interview and that question won't be asked. I know it's such a silly little example, but sort of sticking to the same questions so that we can. These 10 candidates we've interviewed. This one's a 7 out of 10. This is an 8. This is a 6, based on a very, very structured process. And I think we've got to look at things globally, but each context is so different, as Ryan was saying. So in South Africa, the challenges we have, the people, the demographics, everything's so different. But I think identifying that we need people, and we all know diversity is amazing in a company. It really adds so much more to the whole sort of the environment and the productivity as well. So I think it's important that people do question themselves and go, is this fair? Is this valid? Is this unbiased? Checking their biases. Also think we interviewing with like a little bit of a panel can be quite good, and maybe the panel is not everyone looks the same. So just doing a nice reality check there as well. I think that would work quite well. And then another thing where bias could creep in, or with not understanding the context. We have a lot of employers who are often very slow with their process. So they'll invite the same candidate in for 5 interviews. If somebody's unemployed and hasn't got access to transport and money, that they could end up being washed out the side because the process took too long and was expensive. So I think even looking at those small elements to say, are we maybe unwittingly or unconsciously getting rid of people along the way because of certain things? And even another example is a Zoom interview. If you come from an environment where you are not that exposed to technology, you sit in a Zoom interview, you don't know where to look, you don't know how to get on board. The first 10 minutes would be dreadful. So we've seen some employers go, oh, the person didn't do well in the Zoom interview, but that person has never maybe been exposed to Teams or Google Meets or Zoom. They probably were stressed and probably, so I think there's so many little elements where is it bias or is it just not actually understanding the circumstances of candidates?
I'm
Thanks.
really excited about the experience both of you are investing into this discussion, because both sides really matter and both the opinions really matter to the audiences. And when it comes to simple interviewing, sometimes I fully agree that those people who who make friends with technologies can be even worth in terms of skills and adaptability in the company, rather than those who do not have or are not aware of how to handle Zoom meetings or Google meetings and so on. And why employers always ask women about how many children she wants to have? Why they don't ask it man? So Ryan, how many children do you want to have? So let's imagine I'm your future employer. So here's a question to you: how many children do you want to have? I'm sure you're not quite satisfied with this question, right? And you feel embarrassed.
Me? Yeah, I mean, I would be like, oh, I don't know. If I was asked that in an interview, yeah, for sure.
Okay, you're a woman. We know you will go. You'll get the offer, and you'll go on maternity leave. Yes, if I'm pregnant, I'll go on maternity leave, guys. Nowadays, when we have fair and equal rights and this diversity, not only women go on maternity leave, but men go on paternity leave. Why?
That's right.
Why are you asking so sometimes really silly questions? So, guys, it's about your education, it's about your mindset, and what should be really changed. It's not about technology usage; it's about mindset of the companies. So, thanks, guys, for having this discussion. I would say that sometimes it's not enough having the right people or having right technologies, and it smells like we really need to have this tandem of both. So Ryan, in your opinion, as a person who leads this business and who is promoting this fair hiring and recruitment through platforms, what do you think, whether AI is enough on its own to provide fair hiring, or we still need to create this combination and collaboration tandem between human and AI to provide this fair process of recruitment?
Yeah, I think you definitely need a combination of like the two. Like, I think over relying on technology is, potentially setting people up for failure, because especially when you involve AI, sometimes it's kind of like a black box. You don't really know what the inputs are and why is it generating a certain output. So like, it's very important to have like a human interaction or human checkpoint to kind of explain the AI and double check. It's very important to have the oversight just for transparency. So I definitely think you need a balance of the two. And, when you're building like recruitment systems as well, you need to be very flexible, and you can't necessarily have like a one size fits all approach. You need to, account for different nuances, whether it be like local or like global standards. So definitely think a balance between the two is imperative.
Thanks. And Cindy, the sooner this time you'll be able to enjoy AI by the platform developed by Ryan, and to think and to understand how it might be handled to help you move forward in your fight with this unfair hiring. And it's great. And it's great that these initiatives are moving forward. There are still companies like ProTalent that can support underserved communities, and platforms like Ryan's one that really can help candidates to receive what they deserve to get in accordance with their experience, skills, and so on. We are really wrapping up our conversation, and it would be really nice to listen to your recommendations from the point of those who are in the recruitment industry and domain, and those who are providing technologies to this domain. So, Cindy, here's the first question, and maybe it's the wrapping up question to you. What small changes can companies or agencies, in your opinion, make today in order to immediately or as soon as possible help reduce bias in their hiring process, even without these high-tech tools, unless Ryan launches Injobnito?
I think it's about having those conversations, and I think what I've noticed is that a lot of our clients are interviewing like they did 20 years ago, and I think a lot of employers are not trained in human resources. So yes, I'm the factory manager, I'm the engineering manager, I'm the production manager, but I interview someone and I ask the same 5 questions I've used for years. So I think using competency-based questions instead of your own crazy made-up things that you know are nonsensical and are completely biased. I think having that kind of a sensitivity training as well to know what is acceptable and what is not. I think and retraining, because I think sometimes people think, oh, but I'm just getting to know the person. I'm just being like friendly. You know, meanwhile it's offensive. So I think just understanding that. I think for every one of us to embrace AI now, to understand that, you know, it helps us in so many ways, but also to not hoodwink a candidate to think that they're dealing with a person when they're dealing with a computer. So if you've got some computerized or AI thing that's working, I'd let them know that this is done via AI and it's not a person, you know, that they might think that they're working with. So I think it's getting our human side to keep up with the changes in AI, you know, and identifying that a lot of people have so much to offer. If we just know how to dig a little bit deeper and we know how to look at them in the most impartial way possible, looking not at the credentials necessarily, but looking at the capacity, looking at their potential, and looking at their skills, and yeah, and I think it's an ongoing training. I think it's ongoing. The human being is very complex, and the world of work is changing so quickly. And I think anybody who's working in the hiring space needs to, you know, just be up to date with also just the nuances of the area, the culture, you know, the people in the territory that they recruit, you know, and to know how to deal with people, and you know, what's the fairest way to get the questions out of people without insulting them or diminishing them, or, you know, making them feel, you know, less than in any way.
Thanks, Cindy, for sharing your expert perspective. I'm sure that a lot of listeners from our attendees, especially those in HR or recruitment, they are really taking notes to bring some of your insights and ideas into their day-to-day work. I'm sure that even Ryan will take some advantages of this discussion and some insights to get them implemented into his future onboarding and recruitment process, because I bet as long as Ryan grows his business, he will definitely be interested in attracting new talents, right, to develop the product, to introduce it to more communities. So it's impossible without a good team behind you. So Ryan, here's a question to you as a founder. You'll definitely be interested in growing your team in the long run. How do you think we can build recruitment systems that aren't just, say, inclusive on paper nominally, but actually work in both global and local contexts? Would be really interesting to listen to your thoughts, because in the future, this is a good point for you to think about before starting the recruitment process.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think because, you know, you got to think about like the different global and local contexts is, like I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily like a one size fits all. I don't think that approach would work, especially if you're trying to take like what works here in the United States and apply it in different cultures and areas around the world. I think the platform and like the hiring systems, they need to adapt to whatever local nuances, but they still need to uphold like our global standard or like even our company standards, right? So I think it's really important. That means that we need to be collaborating with like regional partners. You know, like for example, if I was to launch in South Africa, I would love to work with Cindy and get her point of view on what works in South Africa and what we can develop to, you know, be effective in that market. Whether it's, you know, collecting different data sets or iterating based on, you know, Cindy's feedback or real world outcomes. You know, inclusion must be embedded on, but like we just got to have a very local approach versus like a one size fits all.
Thanks, Ryan. Cindy, maybe you have something to add.
It's just an interesting comment, but you know, we talk about the nuances. This may be something funny to end on. We hire a lot of South Africans to work remotely for international clients, and the clients often say, but the person is said there's load shedding. And what is this load shedding? And in South Africa, our electricity goes off quite often, sometimes for 2 hours every single day, called load shedding. And it was so interesting having to explain that to another company from another side of the world. I think they thought our delegates, our candidates were lying to them, so making up something. But yeah, I think you're right. It's looking, when hiring, looking at that context of the people in the area that you are looking for, and making it as painless as possible for the candidate, and I think for employers to professionalize the approach. I think a lot of candidates are stepping up. They are, they're learning the technology. They showing up. But a lot of employers, I think there's room for growth, and there's room for elevating our approach to candidates to make sure that they are treated fairly and done in such a good way that anyone would want to work for our company, even if they are regretted. So I think that's a good way of handling that process.
Thanks a lot, Cindy, for sharing. So I suppose it was a really fantastic conversation between both sides, those who are presenting the products and technologies and know how that really helped the recruitment process and to promote fair hiring, and those who are on the side of working with really employers and candidates who are looking for the right place to get onboarded. So right now we can really understand that fair hiring is not just a process, it's a mindset. So choose to hire humans, not just resumes. Thanks a lot for listening to us. Leave your comments. We'll be glad to investigate more topics to get unpacked with our speakers. And Ryan, Cindy, thanks again for being honest within the session and for providing so many really market-based insights to the listeners. See you later.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
Bye-bye.